Good morning. So for the last bit, I've taken an interest and started learning Unity and programming in C Sharp. I've made a couple of simple games and projects with varying success, and it's been surprisingly entertaining for me. So this year, when the Brackeys 2022.2 Game Jam rolled around, I decided to take a crack at it and signed up. As for many other of you indie devs out there, Brackey's YouTube channel basically brought me to where I am as a programmer, and I could reasonably credit him to single-handedly teaching me Unity. So I felt this was the perfect time to try out a jam. Brackey's Jam is one of the biggest hosted on itch.io, with more than 6,000 people signing up and more than 1,000 entries being submitted, based on a theme. Reasonably, I knew I probably would do pretty bad in the grand scheme of it, but it would be a fun challenge. The jam lasts a week long, which also happens to land on one of the busiest weeks it possibly could. I'm on my school's cross-country team and have practice every day after school with a meet later that week. Our drama program was also having auditions for the fall musical this week, leaving just tons of time for my personal projects. So I knew that I would really need to use my time wisely and not overscope, so I wouldn't have to cut any planned content. Spoiler, that did not happen. And with that, the jam began for me at 4 a.m. Sunday the 21st. Valuing my sleep, I didn't wake up at 4 to get the theme right on time, but woke up at a reasonable 7:30ish to check out the theme. You are not alone. It took me almost no thought to come up with an idea. I wanted to make a top-down resource collection game based in space. I started drawing down some of my ideas to get more of an idea of what I was going to make, and it started to feel really good. I wanted you to fly your spaceship from planet to planet, gathering resources to upgrade your equipment and eventually fix your hyperdrive or some other fancy space travel thingy so you could go home. All of the time being pestered by a cute little alien who would knock things out of place, steal your stuff, and break things. With all these ideas ready to go and adrenaline flowing through my veins, I had to go do stuff with my family and be away from my computer for a couple hours. I didn't let this time go to complete waste though. I pulled up the Trello app on my phone and started to plan all the stuff I wanted to include. I decided to lay out my board differently than usual, sorting things on importance that I need them to get done and also including things that I probably wouldn't have time for. Finally able to sit down with me and my precious laptop, I opened a new Unity project and began to code. I downloaded some placeholder assets from the Unity asset store and began to work on a tile set, player movement, and collision. I got that working well, so I set up Cinemachine for the camera movement and started work on the resource nodes that you can mine and get resources from. I made a little bar on your left to show how much battery you have for the drill and duplicated it and set it up on the other side of the screen to show your backpack and how full it was. Then I actually had to implement the system behind them and got it running just swell. I then turned my attention to how I wanted the little alien to work. My dream for how I wanted it was for it to be subtly on the edge of your screen, with only barely able to see him out of the corner of your eye. I doubled the use of the resource nodes so that the alien would use them to hide behind. I got it working with only a couple of hair-pulling bugs and thought it looked really close to how I wanted. I was really happy with my progress, but my brain was completely frazzled. I'd been coding for a solid 9-ish hours that day, and I really needed a break. So I decided to start working on some artwork. I decided to go for a pixel art style. This was my first time working in pixel art, and I was kind of nervous. I was confident in my ability to make non-pixelated 2D art, but this was a complete unknown to me. But I downloaded a palette and began working on it, and surprisingly, it didn't turn out that bad. Really happy with that, I made a drill sprite with an animation frame and made an idle animation for the player. I got those imported and running great, and I was super pleased with everything. I'd accomplished a ton that day and went to sleep relatively early since I had to get up for school the next day. Unfortunately, that's basically where most of the good news ends as the chaos of the week hit me. With school and running practice, I only have a small amount of time in the evenings to work on the project, and I didn't record much of it. I did work on some pixel art though. I made the alien, a little cute slimish guy with just one simple animation, and was pretty happy with that. I made a first attempt at a resource node out of crystals and started working on the tile set for the player. I decided to go for a gray asteroidy feel for the tiles, and the first attempt was quite bad. Everything was too much of the same color, and it just looked really messy and bad. I went through and lightened up some of the tiles and was pretty happy with it, but it still looked a bit messy. But I was satisfied with it for now. About this time, I realized I was really far behind where I needed to be and had to start working on the core features essential to the game for the limited time that I was at home. I was looking for a way I could do pixel art for my phone and found Pixel Studio, and it was literally perfect for what I was doing. For any of you who want to do mobile pixel art, I would highly recommend it. I imported in my color palette and started working on some art. I made a gold resource node, then changed the colors to make uranium and crystal, and was really pleased with how these ones turned out. I drew a simple table and a bunch of other knickknacks that I planned on using to decorate the interior of the ship. One of the things I drew was a battery bar and a fill meter to replace the temporary bars I had in the game currently. Once at home, I implemented some of this art into the game and started on making some interactable stations to both charge the drill and empty your backpack. I got those working roughly and just used the table I had made as placeholder art for those stations. Pretty happy with how that worked. I then went back and worked on the tile set. I cleaned it up, imported it into the engine, and was going to delete the old asset. And instead of just deleting that file, I accidentally deleted the folder that I kept all of my artwork for the entire game, deleting everything I'd imported into the game this far, leaving just a pink, blocky, untextured mess. At first, I was a little annoyed and frustrated, but I had no one else to blame but myself, and it was a simple, just time-consuming fix of re-importing and resetting up my assets, and finished it up pretty quickly. Once I had finished this up, I started to move on to the next thing, and Unity froze. I knew I hadn't saved the project in a while, but reluctantly, I restarted Unity, and all the assets I just re-imported were gone, and it was just back to the pink blocky mess. At that point, I just had it with the project. It was late, I was exhausted, and I still had to get up early the next day, so I just closed my laptop and went to sleep. The next morning, I woke up refreshed and rested and set up all the artwork again in the morning just before school. In the end, it wasn't that big of a problem, but I was so tired and drained that felt like it was a huge task. But once I got some rest, it was easy to work out and I finished that up in a relatively small amount of time. Friday rolled along and I was way behind where I should be. There was no real game loop, just endlessly gathering resources with no objective and no reward. And I really needed to get some core features in and quick. One slight problem. I wasn't going to be home for almost the entire weekend. I had a cross-country meet race for all of you uncultured swine. The team was leaving Friday right after school, and we'd spend the night, run Saturday morning, and swim at a wave pool on the way home, which sounds like an incredibly fun weekend for me, but left minimal room for making my game. We rode the bus up, had dinner, and messed around. But once we got back to the hotel room, I pulled out my laptop and began work on some small features again, and mostly, importantly, showed some of my friends and got a couple good ideas and a needed ego boost from them. But I couldn't stay up too late that night because I had to get up early so I could be ready for my race, so I went to sleep. I got up and went to the race, waited a ridiculous amount of time in line for the bathroom, and ran my race. It was a really good race for me, and I got a new personal best of 17:53. Before any of you tell me how slow I am, run a 5K faster than me, and then you can talk. We packed up all our stuff and started the bus ride home. We stopped about an hour into the bus ride and went swimming. I had loads of fun with all my friends, but we were all extremely exhausted. We got onto the bus, and I realized I had less than 12 hours to finish my game, and I was nowhere near ready. So instead of falling into the comfort of sleep and committed to finishing the game on time, I pulled out my laptop and began work on my project again. I made the ores all randomly assign themselves a resource type. Then I coded in an upgrade station for both the drill and the backpack, and was satisfied enough with how that turned out and decided that was all the features I was going to have time to implement, and began polishing up the game and making a way to actually complete it. The bus got back, I went home, I showered, and was back at it. Instead of a fancy spaceship with a beautifully crafted interior like I was planning, I quickly drew and plopped down a rocket ship on the surface of the asteroid that, once fixed, would trigger the end of the game. I then shifted my attention to the UI. Up until this point, the only way I knew how many of each resource I had was to check the Unity inspector while the game was running. And surprise, surprise, that's not a solution that will work for any actual build of the game. I made the resources just have a little counter on the bottom of the screen so you'd always know how rich you are. I added a simple panel, just made out of different versions of the table, that shows the price of the upgrades and how much it costs to fix the rocket. I was mostly all satisfied with it except for one thing, our little alien friend. He had no prevalence in the game whatsoever. So as an attempt to add this functionality, I made it so that the alien could also hide behind the charge and empty station and knock out the drill or backpack. But in actuality, that still didn't do much to help the alien feel like he had a use. But at that point, I just needed to finish the game. I made a simple start and end scene for the game with just some basic animations and absolutely nothing fancy whatsoever. With only the essentials made, I started exporting a build of the game around 3 in the morning. Yay! After the pain in the butt that I was trying to figure out what's wrong with the build at 3 in the morning, I made the world's simplest itch page, submitted the game to the jam, and went to sleep around 3:30. After a long day of waking up at 6:30, running a race, swimming, have a 4-hour bus ride home, I was absolutely drained and didn't care what I submitted, as long as I submitted something. The next morning after some rest, I went to Itch and cleaned up the submission page, made everything nice-ish and pretty-ish, and overall was really pleased with it. Then I went and started playing and scoring some of the over 1,000 submissions. The games were up for rankings for 2 weeks. I didn't score well, but that was completely what I was expecting, and I was really happy with what I did, and I really learned a lot from the experience. I most definitely overscoped this project and had to cut a lot of content. The more I think about it, the more I realized I got most of the major mechanics I wanted into the game. Everything just lacked polish and purpose. If I had made a ship that you could go into, the game would have felt a lot more complete and coherent. I didn't have any time to implement sound, and that really would have helped out with the game feel, but I still am happy with what I put out. Overall, I loved the jam experience and felt like it helped me just write code quick without having to worry about making it too generic, and I'm 100% planning on doing another jam if I find one that tickles my fancy. Thanks for sticking around this long. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you want to try it out, the game's still up on my itch page, and I'll have a link in the description. I'm planning on updating this game and putting in some of the things originally planned. I feel like this idea can be expanded even more from what I originally planned, and I'm quite excited to do so eventually. I have a couple pieces of art, like the battery icons, that I didn't have time to put in, but I could add in super easily. So if you'd like to see another video about this, or have any ideas for updating this game, leave a comment below, and I'm sure to read it. I also have another game that I'd find fun to do devlog style videos, but I've been working on it for quite some time now without recording anything, so it might feel as if I'm jumping into the middle of it, but if any of you are interested in watching it, let me know. If you like this video, then like and subscribe. If you didn't, don't, or whatever. I'm not your mom. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.